Walter Plunkett is a name that, curiously, isn't as loudly celebrated as Edith Head or Adrian. Yet his legacy drapes itself across some of the grandest cinematic visions ever captured on film. In the often cutthroat world of Golden Age Hollywood costume design, Plunkett carved out a niche as a painstaking craftsman, a man who believed that costumes were not just decoration, but storytelling in their own right. If Edith Head was the archetypal studio costume doyenne and Adrian the flamboyant showman of MGM glamour, Plunkett was the historian, the archivist of fabric and silhouette, who stitched entire eras back to life. Born Walter W. Plunkett in 1902 in Oakland, California, he grew up with a deep interest in theater and the arts. But unlike many of his more self-mythologizing contemporaries, he didn't come from privilege. He hustled his way through New York's early theater scene, hoping to make it as an actor. But backstage, he fell in love with the transformative power of costume. The way a scrap of lace, a carefully cut coat, or a perfectly draped gown could make an audience believe they were looking at a medieval court, a southern plantation, or a jazzy New York speakeasy. By the late 1920s, Plunkett had returned to California just as Hollywood was evolving from the wild early days of silence to the more lavish productions of the sound era. He found himself at RKO Pictures, a relatively young studio that nevertheless churned out iconic films. Plunkett's big break came when he was assigned to design for period pictures, where his voracious research habits shone. He'd spend hours in libraries and rare bookshops, flipping through century-old fashion plates, studying portraits, and rummaging for swatches that would give him clues to forgotten textures and colors. His obsessive dedication paid off spectacularly. Gone with the Wind, 1939, is still the crown jewel of his career, an epic that demanded more than 5,000 individual costume pieces to convincingly recreate the antebellum South and its fiery destruction. The iconic green velvet curtain dress, Scarlett's scandalous red gown at the charity ball, Rhett Butler's immaculate suits, each costume is burned into the collective memory of American cinema. Few people realize that Plunkett even supervised the dyeing of fabrics to achieve the perfect period-accurate shades, or that he fought with producers who wanted cheaper, easier-to-manufacture designs. There's an often-cited anecdote that sums up Plunkett's stubbornness. For the ball scene, he insisted on using genuine hoop skirts and layers of petticoats, which made filming cumbersome and uncomfortable for Vivien Leigh. Yet those silhouettes gave Scarlett her striking hourglass figure, underscoring the character's defiant glamour in a world on the brink of ruin. Beyond Gone with the Wind, Plunkett proved his range in wildly different genres. In Singin in the Rain, 1952, he poked fun at the silent film era with intentionally garish costumes that spoofed the excesses of early Hollywood. Plunkett had the courage to be unflattering when it served the joke. Gaudy beadwork, mismatched prints, and absurd feathered hats turned Jean Hagen's Lena Lamont into a walking punchline. It was a masterclass in how costumes could amplify humor. He was equally adept at more restrained period films. In Little Women, 1933 and 1949, his designs for Katharine Hepburn and later June Allyson captured the gentle domestic world of the March Sisters with delicate bonnets, homespun calicos, and modest dresses that exuded warmth rather than opulence. Plunkett once said that when it came to costume design, the real trick is to let the audience forget they're looking at costumes at all. He was deeply allergic to anachronisms that might pull viewers out of the story. Despite this mastery, critics sometimes argue that Plunkett lacked a recognizable signature, no single silhouette or design quirk that screamed his name. This is true in a way. He was a chameleon who vanished into his eras, But perhaps that was his genius. His costumes never overshadowed the narrative. They served it. They were time machines, not peacock feathers. Plunkett's working relationships were mostly respectful, but not without conflict. He was notoriously protective of his department budgets, often clashing with studio heads who tried to cut corners. He also wasn't above lashing out at co-workers he felt were sloppy about details. Still, many actresses adored him for his gentleness and the way he made them feel at ease in what could be suffocating period garb. When he worked with Vivien Leigh again on other projects, she reportedly described him as a quiet sort of magician. His personal life was never splashed across the tabloids, partly because, like many gay men in mid-century Hollywood, Plunkett kept things discreet. Colleagues who knew him well described a warm, wry sense of humor and an endless appetite for books and history. He collected rare costume plates and antique textiles, sometimes sourcing ideas from 18th century embroidery samples. His circle of friends included other closeted designers and artists, many of whom leaned on each other for support in a time when being openly gay could destroy one's career overnight. In 1957, Plunkett was coaxed out of retirement by his old friend Irene Sharaff to co-design Raintree County, and later contributed to How the West Was Won, 1962. He finally won an Academy Award for the latter, though some film historians feel it was a belated, almost apologetic recognition for a career that really should have earned him multiple Oscars decades earlier. It's one of those strange injustices of old Hollywood. His impact was vast, yet his official accolades remain oddly slim. And yet, when you stand before Vivien Leigh's green velvet curtain gown or watch Gene Kelly swing across the screen in Singin' in the Rain, or see Elizabeth Taylor's gentle March sister bloom in Plunkett's carefully researched skirts, you realize that Walter Plunkett's legacy is stitched directly into the DNA of Hollywood myth. He taught audiences to believe in the past. Not the dusty museum past, but the vivid, romanticized version that could make an entire generation sigh, dream, and lose themselves in the flickering silver light. If his name isn't always the first to come up at film school, it should be. Plunkett was more than a costume designer. He was a patient architect of worlds, one who proved that sometimes the quietest craftsmen leave the loudest echoes.